From right back inside Highmark Stadium, right here in Orchard Park, New York, after the Buffalo Bills make it very interesting, Mr. Talbot, here at Highmark Stadium, winning 35-31 in a nail-biter, and one that fans aren't going to forget anytime soon. This is the Shout Buffalo Bills football podcast brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, you can enter for a chance to win $1 million. Each week, Kings Hawaiian is pitting two city sliders against each other in the ultimate showdown, and you get to help decide the winner. Vote weekly for your favorite regional slider for a chance to win all season long and earn entries for the $1 million prize. Explore the interactive stadium to play games, get recipes, share photos, and more. Visit topsmarkets.com/redzone to enter. When the game started and the first quarter was humming along, I don't think we thought we were going to be sitting here having the conversation that we're about to have about this team up 17-0. And then it was just 6 straight possessions of just disaster. Josh Allen just turning into the sugar high version of himself and turning the ball over at a very high clip, keeping the Dolphins in this game. And, Skylar Thompson, because they allowed them to hang around, felt like he got more comfortable as the game went on. And by the end of the game, just disaster scenario late in this one, having it be a 3-point victory for the Bills. A lot of things maybe to be concerned about here.
Plenty to be concerned about, Mr. Parrino. You said it. They're up 17-0. Realistically, could have been 21-0. Knox drops the one touchdown. They have to settle for a field goal. But then you mentioned it. What are the Bills doing? They end up throwing a deep ball down the field, a pass intended for John Brown. And whether it was a miscommunication, it just didn't make sense in the moment. You're up 17-0. James Cook had just had 2 back-to-back runs for, I believe, 21 yards on those 2 runs total. And you have a chance to go up even more. You put the ball in Xavier Howard's hands, and all of a sudden the game kind of turns around at that point. The Bills' defense holds to a few field goals, but before you know it, there's a real game at halftime. And then in the second half, it was still a struggle for the Bills. They got another double-digit lead, but this one never felt like the Bills were going to pull away in that second half.
Right. And, it comes down to coming into this game. It was the conversation that we were having during the week, like back on the Wednesday show, into the Friday show. What is the way that the Bills could kind of screw this all up? And they just did about everything that you could possibly do. I mean, from the turnovers to, giving them short fields, letting their defense score a touchdown. Those are the kinds of things that you let a team hang around for long enough, and it's going to be, they're going to gain confidence. And there was enough playmakers. Listen, I know a lot of people were out for this Miami Dolphins team, but they still had talent at the receiver positions. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle probably left a couple plays out here. And that's the scary thing too, is that if they make a couple catches in this game, they extend a couple plays, they get, a couple extra yards, a few extra first downs. I mean, the Dolphins weren't good on third down today. They didn't have a ton of yardage. They almost got doubled up by the Bills in total yardage. This should have been an absolute blowout. And it just comes down to, executing and taking care of the ball. The Bills just didn't do that at times in this game.
No, and it wasn't just the turnovers too. It was special teams. Bills go up 17-0. Tyler Bass just shanks the ball out of bounds. Dolphins started the 40. That's their first scoring drive. Even late in the game, and mind you, the Bills recovered it. You have Nyheim Hines muff a punt, and they're lucky to recover that because this was just a comedy of errors in terms of the turnovers, the Josh Allen fumble in the third quarter after the Bills had a 3-and-out to get things started. A lot of little mistakes that started to snowball, and really, like you said, ultimately could have cost the Bills this game.
If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Smash that like button. We're going to talk about a couple performances that I want to key in on here today. A couple things that we talked about in the post-game press conference with a few different players. From an offensive perspective, or however you want to kind of paint this brush. Well, let me ask you this first before we move on. What was your biggest, if you were to take one thing from this game and say, okay, this is the biggest concern I have, because that's what we put in the headline. What would that be as you kind of look ahead to maybe the Bengals? We'll see what happens with the Ravens game, and obviously the Chiefs, who probably loom as well.
So my biggest takeaway, Matt, would be the Bills. I would say it was almost a dud of a game, and yet they still scored over. They scored 30-some points. They still won the game, and this was far from their best effort. So there's a ton to clean up, as you mentioned early on in the show. I guess there's something encouraging to be said about being able to win in these difficult games in the playoffs. And be able to put up 34 points like it's almost nothing. but it's still way too much in terms of the negatives as well.
So one takeaway that I had that I think is the most encouraging, because to your point, they're probably not going to play offensively like that in most games. I mean, it almost was a snowball effect. Josh Allen gets into these modes where there's, maybe a turnover or two, and then, he starts pressing, and it kind of led into everything. And he also mentioned, which I thought was interesting, like, all right, they were playing a lot of cover zero. They were sending a lot of different blitz packages at them. They were trying to get pressure on them, force the ball out of his hands. And so the Bills, in turn, which I think played into the Miami Dolphins game plan, was, all right, we're going to beat them down the field, and we're going to keep going down the field over and over again because of some of the big plays that they had early on in the game, the first quarter. Well, that ended up playing right into the Miami Dolphins' hands. And then over the course of the game, whether it be, Ken Dorsey dialing up back-to-back deep ball, goal balls to Gabe Davis down the left sideline, they almost look like virtually identical plays. And I just think that, one of the things that he's gotten dinged on over the course of the season when people have been disappointed at times in Ken Dorsey is lack of creativity and maybe, playing into what the other team expects you to do. I thought that there was some run calls early in the game when the Bills had things going in the passing game. They were on the attack, and it was almost like they had passed like 4 or 5 times. They got into a first down, past the 50-yard line. It was almost like, all right, well, we almost have to run the ball now, right? And I just think those are the kinds of things, like, you have to almost be 2 or 3 steps ahead of the other team. Like, what are they expecting from us? Like, and also maybe sometimes not overthink it and just rely on what you're doing well in the moment. I thought that kind of stifled a drive early on as well.
Yeah, situational football is what it comes down to. And you mentioned it, fourth quarter, why are you taking 2 deep shots to Gabe Davis? There's a time and a place for it. There was a play in the first half, Khalil Shakir, it looked like a 54-yard catch, then it gets challenged and overturned. On a play like that, he was wide open down the field. You needed a big play. Things were starting to snowball at that point, and he was open. But when you're trying to hold on to a lead late in the game, I did not understand those play calls. Now, was Davis open, especially in that second one? Yes. And if you connect, no one's complaining about that play. But there's something to be said about moving the ball, keeping control of the clock, and putting the game away with a late score, which the Bills didn't do. They just kind of hung on and ended up winning by 3.
Big takeaway for me, Tre'Davious White. Listen, are there times he's still kind of getting beat, like looking like out of a play or however you want to kind of analyze it? Sure. He's not going to make every play, especially against guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Those are tough matchups. But I'm telling you, I'm starting to see a swagger back from Trey White that just feels like he's turning a corner. And maybe he never does fully get back this season to the to all-pro Trey. And I noticed that his fiance tweeted out today, like, all-pro Trey with the little, blow your nose emoji, because obviously supporting her better half, perhaps. But I agree with that. Like, it looks like the all-pro version of Trey White from a mentality perspective, which I think is the most important piece to this. Sean McDermott said today that this secondary made some big plays today. And I was surprised early in the game to see Dane Jackson, all in at that CB2 spot. We didn't see any Kaiir Elam until Dane Jackson got injured. Lo and behold, Elam comes in the game, and I thought was arguably their best secondary player outside of, I think you could probably make a case for Dean Marlowe, who had an interception, had a really nice run tackle in run defense. But Kaiir Elam comes in, he makes several plays. The interception, he had a pass breakup where he was fighting with Tyreek Hill. And then he comes up, takes on a blocker, and blows up a running play. I mean, almost like the full experience of a cornerback that you could want in a game. I thought Kaiir Elam delivered that. He got banged up in the game. The Bills said that it was a leg cramp, which I think they dodged a bullet there. We didn't get a chance to talk to Kaiir Elam after the game, but I will give you an advance notice. My toolsy player of the game, Kaiir Elam, I thought came in, gave the Bills a huge spark when their defense needed to really hold the line in the third and fourth quarter as the Dolphins continue to hang around.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, Matt. This was a player just waiting for his opportunity, and it came today. And in the moment, he shined brightly. Almost 2 interceptions. The one pass breakup on Tyreek Hill was in his hands at one point, and he ended up dropping it. He had a great interception, great play overall. It's what you want to see. And Trey White said post-game he wasn't surprised with Elam's play. He's a student of the game. Sean McDermott, same thing. You can either put your chin down and mope, or you can go and put in the work. And Elam clearly has been putting in that work. He had a very tough matchup today against some really good Dolphins wide receivers, and he had a maybe his best game to date, given the opportunity. Trey White, you mentioned it, rounding back into form, 2 pass breakups on the day. He said something interesting post-game, too, in terms of the work he's put in, the fact that he knows sometimes an injury like this could take 2 seasons, and he's just trying to be the best version of himself out there right now. And again, you saw that swagger, you saw a little bit of the celebrating. This is going to be a gauntlet for the Bills in the playoffs. No matter who they play next week, it might be the Bengals, who have a trio of great wide receivers, and then the week after that, it could potentially be the Chiefs. So there's no letdown coming up. So the Bills need Trey White. They need Kyrie Elam, Dean Marlowe and company to just be great, just like they were today.
I want to talk a little bit more about the defensive performance, but like, let's shift gears back over to offense for a moment, because I think there's a lot to dive into with this offensive performance from the Bills. Because as you mentioned, I mean, look at the stats here. I mean, 423 total yards of offense. They ran 72 plays, 9 of 16 on third down, 25 first downs. They had 107 rushing yards, 316 passing yards. They had 2 receivers go over 100. I mean, Stephon Diggs was over 100 in the second quarter. And then they literally went out of their way to take him completely out of the game. And what have we talked about in the case that when teams want to do that, who are going to be the guys to step up? Isaiah McKenzie, he was out today. We'll probably learn more about that hamstring injury over the course of the next week. But you look at Gabe Davis, who steps up into that wide receiver too. Playoff Gabe is a real thing. Yeah. I mean, he comes in here with 113 and a touchdown, some big catches down the stretch, makes that one catch where he kind of got his arm or his hand under the ball. That touchdown was a beautiful throw from Josh Allen. And then Khalil Shakir, who makes that big screw up early on, and he owned it in the locker room. He was like, listen, that's a bad play. And he said Stephon Diggs came up to him. On the next play, you're going to make a play later in the game. And lo and behold, he does make a big one. When the Bills offense was really struggling, he gives them a big play. And then Cole Beasley, 3 targets early in this game, no catches. The ball bounces off the front of his jersey, intercepted by the Dolphins. Just nothing going right for Cole Beasley early in this game. And then, he just stays with it, finds a way to connect with Josh Allen, gets a touchdown. Big time plays. Dawson Knox could have had 2 touchdowns today. Big time plays all around at the weapon spots.
Yeah, the weapons were great today. And you mentioned it. Khalil Shakir goes over 100 yards if he hauls in that first half catch before halftime. Cole Beasley talked about the 29-yard reception in early on in the game and the touchdown. His first career postseason touchdown. That's and crazy. He didn't quite go full Lizzo, but he said it's about time that he did that. So he was really excited about it after the game.
What you know about Lizzo?
Oh, I know it's about damn time. That's about it with Lizzo for me. But he almost quoted that verbatim. And, for Cole Beasley, I love what he said. He said it was all about perspective. The first 2 games he's called up, 2 receptions, 18 yards. He was called up for the Bengals game as well. Obviously didn't have any targets in that one. The game ended midway through the first quarter. And he said, I wasn't necessarily happy with the amount of playing time I was getting, but there's something about just being back here with the guys and the fact that he was semi-retired. He was retired and then he came back out of that retirement. So I like what we saw from him. Dawson Knox, first of all, 5th straight game with a touchdown reception. He is probably the first player in Bills history to have the opening touchdown in 3 consecutive playoff years. Right. First touchdown against the Colts in 2020. First touchdown last offseason against the Patriots, the one in the back of the end zone. First touchdown today. Knox is stepping up in a big-time manner for the Bills right now, too, and you have to be happy across the board with all of their offensive playmakers at the wide receiver and tight end position. Even Quentin Morris had a nice grab today.
Yeah, and late in that game, Reggie Gilliam got banged up on a special teams play, and that, I think, maybe opened up an additional opportunity for Quentin Morris. It's been interesting how they've used Morris. I felt like this season they've started to, later as the season has progressed, they've started to kind of work him in more like into all right, Dawson Knox, we're going to kind of try to ease the burden on you from a stat perspective. When you need a blow, and by the way, this is a pretty common phrase, right? Like in sports, like if you're getting tired, like in a game, and you want to a break, that people say oh, I need a blow, right? Like I need a couple, breaths of air, to take a time out. Somebody was giving me a hard time about this recently. What does that mean? I think that's a tale as old as time. I feel like that's a pretty common phrase.
Yeah, that's a very common phrase. It's exactly what you said. You need a few plays off on the sidelines. You get a blow and you let someone come in and replace you. And in this case, it's Quentin Morris. And, Morris was an undrafted free agent in the past few years. And raw ability in terms of the athleticism, in terms of former receiver. Yeah. And you like what he's brought to this team this year. And you hope that he has some competition for tight end too in the offseason, but you like what you've also seen given those limited opportunities.
All right. So we talked about some weapons stepping up, which is huge because next week, if you're playing the Bengals, you're probably going to be in a shootout. So you're going to need this exact same performance offensively without the turnovers. And I think Josh Allen knows that, listen, they dodged, some real bullets today. And against a team like the Bengals or the Chiefs, they've seen it over the last couple of years. And listen, there's tape out there on this offense of them not turning the ball over in those kinds of situations. So he's got to kind of get things together. It's been a little bit more of a herky-jerky year from a turnover perspective, and it goes back to something we've been talking about, and it's the perfect transition point. There's some issues on this offensive line. I mean, Josh Allen was hit 13 times today. He was sacked 7 times today. And I think what you're seeing with the way that he's putting the ball in jeopardy, from the way that he's holding it when he's running, from the errant passes that he's kind of thrown, the dangerous passes he's thrown at times, comes down to the fact that every time he drops back, he's under siege. I mean, like there's breakdowns in front of him all game long. I mean, I noticed on at least 5 separate occasions where Spencer Brown just completely got blown up in his block. Now, to be fair, he's going against Jalen Phillips, who honestly is starting to look like the best pure pass rusher of that draft a couple years ago. He looked dominant today at times. Now, I don't know how much of that was going against Spencer Brown and how much of that was Jalen Phillips, but he looked really good. They have some real work to do on this offensive line. And I do wonder, if you're talking about big time overarching concerns, do the Bills have enough firepower on that offensive line to go up against DJ Reader and Trey Hendrickson next round, potentially Chris Jones potentially after that? And oh, by the way, there might be a San Francisco 49ers or Philadelphia Eagles team waiting in the Super Bowl. I mean, you talk about a gauntlet. That is a loaded gauntlet of real talent on defensive line.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, some of it was just poor play. Some of it was miscommunications. One of Allen's first sacks, it looked like Ryan Bates was pulling. He thought it was a run play, and he had pressure right in his face. This offensive line did not play well today. Like you said, 13 hits, 7 sacks. They have to be better across the board, stronger matchups to come. And the Bills, they can't do anything about it now. It's definitely, I think, going to be a priority number 1 in the offseason via the draft, maybe get some quality linemen in. But the interior was really beat up today. I thought that Zach Sealer had an outstanding game, and I don't have his stats in front of me, but he was the MVP for me for the Dolphins. I feel like he had multiple sacks along with Christian Wilkins. I split a few where Allen didn't gain anything, but they were in his face all game as well.
4 quarterback hits, a tackle for a loss, and 2 sacks.
Yeah, that's a great game. And you just mentioned some of the guys that are waiting, and this is not a knock on Sealer, but DJ Reader is a more prominent defensive tackle. Chris Jones is a more prominent defensive tackle. So it's not just coming off the edges with Spencer Brown, who has been a big problem this year. It's also the interior right now as well.
Let's shift gears to the other line for the Bills, their defensive line, which, you look at a game like this with all these injuries on the Dolphins offensive line, and you probably say to yourself, you're going to need a big time performance from that D line. And, you're without Liam Eichenberg. Taron Armstead is 100% not 100%. Like, let's be honest. The Dolphins were killing themselves. I think they had at the end of the game 4 false start penalties. Yeah. I mean, just completely, reckless, game management from just an offensive perspective in that front. But I thought the D-line stepped up and played really well. And I thought Leslie Frazier mixed in the blitzes really good. When you went back and watched last week's game, the Dolphins against the Jets, who obviously have that really good defensive line, some of the wins they had against Skylar Thompson were when they were sending Quincy Williams, the linebacker, on some blitz looks. And I thought Matt Milano did a great job of that today. 2 sacks. He was responsible for 3 of the 11 quarterback hits on Skylar Thompson. Huge game for Milano. He had 2 tackles for a loss as well. And I thought, the big thing for the Bills defense too, tackling. Like I didn't notice a ton of missed tackles. Milano had 1 on that one play, where he probably should have made the tackle. But I thought overall, really, really good work from this Bills defense and specifically the D-line.
Yeah, the D-line played well in terms of getting pressure. They also did a great job of stopping the run today. You go back to the previous matchup, and yes, I know Raheem Mostert was not in this game, but Mostert ran all over the Bills, averaged 8 yards per carry. What was the final stat line for the running backs today, or the running game?
20 carries for 42 yards. They averaged 2.1 yards a pop on the ground. That's unreal.
And you would have thought that leaning on the run game would have been something they wanted to do in Miami. with the young quarterback, having Jeff Wilson in the system, Ahmed as well, two guys that have run the ball pretty well for them this season. The Bills just shut that down. In terms of the pass rush, Boogie Basham with the sack. I think Daquan Jones may have had the other one on the D-line. I'm sorry, Ed Oliver. Daquan Jones had at least one pressure. You had a good game across the line. Shaq Lawson had some pressure there too. So they were able to make him move. And again, Skylar Thompson, looking back at the game, maybe he's going to look back and say, man, I should have taken off and used my legs on a few of those plays. Right. But the Bills were able to force him out of the pocket, get a lot of throwaways, get a lot of difficult passes along the sidelines that went incomplete. So I thought they did a good job. Matt Milano was outstanding as usual. I thought the linebackers had a really nice game as well.
If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We got a ton of content coming your way. Obviously, things get ratcheted up quite a bit here as we move into the divisional round of the playoffs. We have a live show coming to you on January 27th. And we hope for Bills fans' sake that is an AFC title game preview show. But even if it ends up being a postseason wrap-up show, the Bills don't get it done next week. That's okay, because it's about community. It's about getting together. It's about sharing our shared interest in this Bills team. Obviously, we do this 365 talking about your Buffalo Bills. Hit that like and subscribe, like I mentioned, and find us on all of your podcast platforms. You can always get this if you want to download this on audio form, you can get it on Apple, Spotify. We meet a ton of people all the time that say they just crush it on the way to work or the next day after a game. We really appreciate all your support. Another thing on Skylar Thompson, though, I think part of the problem is he's got a really good athletic profile, right? Like when he moves around, you're saying like, man, you would like to see him run a little bit more, but I think it's like easier said than done. Like you look at Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, some of the other guys, and even Daniel Jones for this Giants team. I think part of it is like, you have to have a knack for when to run, how to attack the team. And you also don't want to put the ball in jeopardy. Like if your ball security isn't great, that could be a problem. And maybe that's something they tell them, like, listen, run if you have a lane and if you feel comfortable, but if you don't, throw the ball away because we don't want any turnovers. I just don't know when he gets out of the pocket, as I've watched the last couple of his, starts. And then again today, he just looks uncomfortable. Like he's just looking to get rid of the ball because he's worried about what that next step could be. Some guys just can't maybe run with it.
No, and that's fair. And listen, this is a second to last drafted quarterback in this year's draft class.
Should they have taken Brock Purdy?
Yeah, I think let me say this. I think Brock Purdy is a very talented quarterback. I also think that he is in the dream system for a quarterback. I think Shanahan's system helps bring out the strengths no matter who is there, although maybe mine is Trey Lance, who's kind of was the only one that struggled so far. Sorry, Trey Lance fans. But he was great. But yeah, second to last quarterback drafted. I don't think Miami was expecting him to play a significant amount of time as a rookie. We ended up in 8 games, including this week's game. 3 starts. So not ideal, but good experience going forward, especially considering the fact that while Tua is supposedly in their future for 2023 with his injury history, I think that the Dolphins will look back and say, hey, it's good that Thompson ended up getting all these reps and there were some good things to take from it going forward.
So if you want some good things to take for you going forward, make sure you head over to valuehomecenters.com right now. They got their latest ad out, all the deals in the world that you want to find. You've got a home project that you're working on, something around the house, want to get a gift for a friend. Make sure you join their text program, and you do that by texting VALUE, VALU, to this number right here, 80692. You'll start saving even more. You'll receive exclusive coupons, see their weekly deals, and so much more. We got to give out our Toolsy players of the game, our value Toolsy player of the game. I'll start because it's Kyer Elam for me, and I want to talk about him again because this was a moment for him, right? Dane Jackson goes down. Christian Benford still inactive. He's working his way back from injury. You drafted Kyer Elam in the first round. He wasn't even playing in this game. They were all in on Dane Jackson, guy that they think that they could trust. We were talking about during the game. He's the new Levi Wallace, right? I mean, when in doubt, they are going to default to Dane Jackson because, they know what he can do in the run game, so on and so forth. This was a big moment for Kyer Elam. I said it all along. I thought he should have been playing more. I would have, at the very least, rotated him in with Dane Jackson. And that's not a knock on Jackson. It's more about, to me, what I think Kyer Elam can be, and he proved it today. He's on the field. I mean, it's an easy place to be when you're going up against Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, despite the drop issues. when you get out in space, when you're fighting one-on-one with them, to just shrink a little bit in those moments. Sure. And today we saw Kyrie Elam completely rise to that challenge. You want to take a takeaway? We mentioned Trey earlier today. Kyrie Elam's going to be huge next week against Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd if that ends up being the Bengals. I think he gained a lot of confidence in this game. Same thing with Tre'Davious White. I think in that Cincinnati game, if you're looking for hope also, this Bills defensive line is playing with a lot of confidence. They're going to be going up against a very banged up, potentially Cincinnati offensive line as well. You get some pressure combined with guys that are making plays back-to-back weeks. Trey White interception, Kyrie Elam interception in the most important time of the season. Toolsy player of the game today for Kyrie.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And listen, there were guys that went over 100 yards or guys that scored touchdowns. I'm going off the beaten path, Matt. I'm going with Devin Singletary for my value player of the game. 3rd and long, game on the line. Defense knows what you are going to do. You're going to run the ball. You want to run that clock down with whether or not you move the chains. And what does Singletary do? He takes on some hits. He keeps his legs moving. He lets the offensive lineman give him a little bit of a push forward as well. And he gets those tough yards. He gets the first down, and the Bills only have to take one knee after that. James Cook has been great. He's that Corvette. He's that extra gear. He's the guy that can take it the distance anytime he carries it. But Devin Singletary, he's the family van with 100,000 miles on it. There might be a hiccup here or there. There might be a fumble.
Poor David. Poor motor.
Motor, exactly. But that motor still runs, and it runs well. And when you need it to come through, he comes through in those clutch moments. And it goes back to the coaching staff. We talked about how Dane Jackson was that player at cornerback that they rely on. They can rely on Devin Singletary in the biggest moments.
Speaking of the biggest moments, was there a hair out of place or something? You were just looking at my
mane like something was going wrong there. It's been a long day.
There's never a hair out of place, ever.
I can say the same thing about that beard. It's always fresh. It's always ready to go. We appreciate everybody joining us here on this live episode of Shout, the Buffalo Bills football podcast. We'll be with you for a few more minutes here. I saw a comment in there about the Ravens also. I want to throw it in there. I'm not counting out the Ravens. As a matter of fact, I've been talking about it all week. I heard one of our good friends, Mr. Nate Geary, today. We were listening to him on the drive into work, and he said, I think it'd be as impossible for the Ravens to beat the Bengals as he thought it would be for the Dolphins to beat the Bills. And now maybe he was right, because this ended up being a lot closer than anybody thought. But I think he had the same idea that this was a very big long shot for the Dolphins to win this game. I don't think it's a long shot for the Ravens. I think there's a path to winning this game for them. Tyler Huntley can play just mistake-free football, and that defense can put pressure on Joe Burrow and that offensive line. Divisional rivalry game, you kind of throw it out. And listen, another big takeaway from this game too is, like, I know the cliche is the other guys on the other side of the ball get paid too.
Yeah.
Christian Wilkins, Melvin Ingram, Van Ginkel. I mean, really that front seven, I thought they really came to play and tried to be out physical that offensive line for the Bills, and they won that matchup for most of the day.
Yeah, and there's also something to be said, Matt, about the fact that the Bengals are talking a little bit in the playoffs. They're the big dogs of the AFC. You can't tell me that the Ravens aren't going to come into this game with a little chip on their shoulder. And if Huntley plays a clean game, if J.K. Dobbins gets going, he said, I want the ball. I want to carry the team on my back in this game. They can control the clock. They can put up some points that way. And then defensively, you said it. The Bengals offensive line is a little bit banged up right now. Now, this is not a Wink Martindale defense. We saw them win a game today. Kudos to the Giants. But this is still a defense that can get after the quarterback. And if they can get after Burrow, whether that's sacking him, pressuring him, forcing interceptions or turnovers, then anything can happen, just like we almost saw here today at Highmark Stadium.
Let's talk about bigger picture stuff real quick. There's a lot that's been going on with this team over the last 2 weeks, right? I mean, DeMar Hamlin was back in the building yesterday, and you think about, like, you wrote a story about Trey White finally getting his hug and, getting to meet with DeMar. A bunch of players were able to go over and see him. Sean McDermott said, being the team guy that he is, he was trying to stay off to the, the side, like the far end of the end zone, and just kind of, just be around the team without being like maybe a distraction. But man, I can't imagine that would be a distraction. If I was a player on that team, I want him front and center, just to be able to love on him and just be a part of the whole situation. But bigger picture stuff, this team's gone through a lot over the last couple of weeks. And I wonder, as much as you could kind of dial in on like, I know for me, we're now January 15th. We're towards the end of the NFL season. Like, I'm in times I'm hitting the cruise control, right? Like just trying to get to the end of the line. Like it's a great job, a fun job, but doing it week after week after week, you get tired. It gets tiring. And, maybe there's an error in an article, or maybe we have a bad segment on the podcast. Like I could see that happening. Right. So part of me wonders how much what we saw today, just this kind of discombobulated effort, once things kind of went off the beaten path, has anything to do with what this organization has gone through over the last couple of weeks. And maybe if this can be a reset to be like, okay, we had so many things go wrong in this game and we were in danger. We were down in the second half against a team that, they were supposed to beat by 2 touchdowns. Maybe they're able to springboard off of this, reset, refocused, and maybe have it not be as big of an issue moving forward. Or maybe this continues to be something where maybe the last couple of weeks have just taken a lot out of this team and organization.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find another team that's had a more emotional, draining year than the Bills this season. You can go all the way back to actually Trey White said it in his response today with the media. He brought up the top shooting first. He brought up a lot of the injuries with the players. He brought up a lot of the things with family members of the players and the things that they've had to go through as a team. And it's brought them closer together. It's added resolve to them wanting to play for one another. But at the same time, it takes its toll on you over the course of a season. And yet there's been great things with DeMar Hamlin's improved health, with Micah Hyde's IR window opening up. But it's going to be interesting to see next week if they come out a little, I can't say flat. They opened up 17-0, but if they kind of hit a wall, are they going to be able to bounce back against a better team? No offense to the Dolphins, but whoever they play is advancing, and that's going to be a better team. Or is this going to be the end of the road? I think that the Bills went in as Super Bowl favorites this year, and they started out really strong. But with every little thing that's happened, and you lose your best safety, or one of your top safeties, you lose Von Miller, just the on-player or on-field issues, not even anything off-field, it takes its toll, Matt.
It does. You mentioned safety a couple times in there. Michael Hyde, obviously. Sean McDermott said a couple days ago that don't expect Micah Hyde in this game. Also, don't expect him next week. He will not be ready to go for the divisional round. Sean McDermott already ruling him out. So I know a lot of Bills fans are kind of like, watching that storyline because what a juice, delivering move that would be to add him back into the active roster on game day. But I want to shout out a couple other players. We gave out our Toolsy players of the game. I think we could throw some side action here at Dean Marlowe, who stepped in here today, second straight start. And I think he's really lifted this defense. We were talking about Kyrie Elam making a play that, gave this team, a big spark. Dean Marlowe with that interception, just precision. Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott, secondary play. He kind of got into his zone, hid underneath that first receiver, was able to kind of float back a little bit. And Skylar Thompson, I don't even think saw him, picks it off, makes the play. And it's one thing to make that play, but it's another thing, and knock it down maybe, but it's another thing to actually pick it off. That was a huge spark and a huge play. He made a play in the run game as well. Huge shout out to Dean Marlowe.
Yeah, and I can't help but smile because post-game, the first thing he admitted was he was out of place schematically on that play.
Oh, wow.
He's not where he was supposed to be, and he said,
it worked out.
It worked out pretty nicely. Maybe they need to be out of place a few more times throughout the game. But he said he recovered on it. He was able to make a good play on the ball, and he came away with the interception. So, yeah, just one of those plays where I loved the honesty. It wasn't just, I read his eyes and I kind of was waiting for him. I was actually out of place, but I was able to recover and make a really good play on the ball. But he's been really good since they've had to call him up. And, we talked about it when they first traded for him. He was inactive a lot. He didn't get much playing time. But when the opportunity has come, he's really stepped up and played some quality football against the Patriots last week and against the Dolphins this week.
I'm really interested to see what the Tremaine Edmonds contract looks like because, this was against Skylar Thompson today and Dolphins offense that, I don't think, without Tua, it's just different. They still got great players. And, I think Gesicki even played well today. But you want to talk about game-changing plays. Tremaine Edmonds made several of them. And they weren't the splashy variety like the sacks or the interceptions that I know fans have been clamoring for. He's had a couple of those this year, but they're listed little things, just the way that he moves on the football field and changes the dynamic of the opponent's passing game. He read his coverage read on Salvin Ahmed out of the backfield when If he doesn't read that in
Yeah.
time and explode and make that tackle, first of all, it's an incomplete pass, number one. But number two, if he doesn't react quick enough, Amma catches that ball and probably gains about 10 yards for a first time. You know, it was also such a ferocious hit that it, you know, sidelined Amma. And you don't ever want anybody to be injured, but it sidelined him for a couple plays. And that's just the kind of impact that Tremaine Edmonds has from a physical perspective. Down the stretch, middle of the field, seam route, Mike Gesicki was wide open.
Yeah.
Tremaine Edmonds makes a dive over to the ball, gets just a twinge of a hand, tip of the fingertip. Yes.
Yeah.
Why do you keep looking at my hair?
I'm not.
Is there something wrong with it?
I'm not looking at your hair. No,
We're not usually in this situation where we're this close. We're usually on different screens. Anyway, sorry, sidetrack. Edmonds reaches up, just gets a fingernail on that ball. And it was enough. If you watch the slow-mo replay where the ball moved just enough, Gesicki's not able to haul it in. Those are monster plays in coverage. And Tremaine Edmonds, I mean, I know Matt Milano got all the love this week because of, and again, played like an all-pro player. I think Tremaine Edmonds is right in the conversation as an all-pro caliber player.
Yeah, and he gets a lot of love from opposing coaches, from media. The Bills fan base over the years, maybe not so much love, but this is a career year for him, and it has been. And, you know, that hit on Ahmed was a huge play. It was something where, how many times, Matt, did we see Skylar Thompson complete a short pass where they were able to move the chains? Right. This was one that was read well. There was no blocker in front of him, and he just blew the play up. The play to Gesicki was huge too. We've already talked about Milano. This Bills linebacking core is playing among the best in the league for a reason, and there's a lot of reason to have faith in them.
I saw a comment, and I see the reaction is right in line with what it should be. Somebody said, "Get Edmonds off the team, please." And I think that, you know, sometimes the trolls even make it into the Shout Football podcast comment section, because that is the ultimate troll job. Let's get real here. I mean, I think Tremaine Edmonds has been one of the most solid pieces of this defense all season. And I've even understood, I've been, you know, I've always been a little bit higher on Edmonds than most. And I've understood you take a guy, you trade up for him in the first round, and you want some of those splash plays, and you see guys like Roquan Smith and Fred Warner, guys that are just flying around the ball and then flying around the field and then also making those big time plays. You want more. I get that. Sure. But Tremaine Edmonds has offered those splash plays at a higher level this season, but also just like his presence. I don't think people really understand how much it changes what offenses are even able to dial up and try to execute because he's out there.
Yeah, and there's something to be said, too, about the talent that was in front of him in past years. I think it helps when you have a Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver playing at a high caliber, and it allows you to free up and play more freely in the run game. There were some times where over-pursuing was one of his biggest knocks on him. I haven't seen that from him much at all this year. He's been solid in the run game. He's made those plays with his athleticism in the passing game. And going back to a previous game this season, go back to that Vikings game. The Bills were dominating early, and that's when Tremaine Edmonds was on the field. As soon as Edmonds went out, that's when the Vikings started moving the ball. He is a difference maker for this defense, whether some people realize it or not. And with him and Milano out there, you know, they're always going to have a chance to stop drives and to get the ball back for the offense.
You're always going to have a chance if you head over to the Tops Carryout Cafe to hook yourself up for game day, your tailgating spread, or whatever you need. All week long, they got you hooked up over at the Carryout Cafe. Hot to go, fresh, large cheese and pepperoni pizzas, $14. The jumbo chicken wings, 10 count, $14. The legendary breakfast pizza, $20. I'm going to start talking to the Bills PR people, see if they can't get some Tops breakfast pizzas in here for us in the morning. That would be beautiful.
They got some
or
meatballs today.
Yeah, they had
some Tops
mulberry meatballs. That'd be great. Those were great. Here's the thing. Maybe next time, on the drive over, we just stop over at Tops, grab a couple pies, bring them in for the press people. People are going to be really excited about that. I think that's big. Also, somebody said in the comments that, first of all, a great Office reference, meet my eyeline, Jim. Remember that one?
Yeah,
that's a good one. And then also said that your eyeline is at my hair level. So that's part of it. But your chin moved up and your eyeline went up. So yeah, I just was uncomfortable with that. But anyway, pizza or taco log, 6 count, $7.69. Baby back rib sections, $5.99 a pound. Sub sandwiches, wraps, apps, sides, and so much more. Visit topsmarkets.com/redzone for the complete menu of ready to enjoy fan favorites. One final take here, and I want to leave you with this, and I want to get your thoughts on it, because off the wall here, right? Look at how the Bengals have been talking the last couple of weeks. Figure that they're going to, they're the favorite to beat the Ravens. Say they win, they're going to be in the stadium here, maybe Saturday night, Sunday next week. I think that this kind of game where you escape with a win, but you put out a lot of bad tape, a lot of good tape, but a lot of bad tape, increases though that confidence meter for the Bengals to come in here and to smash you around for a while and then walk away with a big win on the road. I think this could add to that. I think this could potentially help the Bills and also refocus things, knowing that, hey, man, like we should have just absolutely destroyed the Dolphins in this building. Now you have to go back to the drawing board. You have to refocus, knowing that it's only going to get harder for here. And maybe with playoff Gabe and Stephon Diggs, who was out of his mind for the first 18 minutes before the Dolphins did everything they could to take him out of the game, Knox making plays, Devin Singletary making plays, James Cook heavily involved in the run game. Somebody tweeted at me, by the way, something crazy. I didn't respond to it, but like, we got to get James Cook more involved in the offense. And I looked at, he had more carries than Devin Singletary in this game. So calm down if you're watching. Thank you for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe as well. I think the Bills can find a way to use this as a net positive moving forward, as crazy as that is to sound, in the immediate aftermath of the result.
And listen, this was their third matchup this season against Miami, and Miami tried some new things that the Bills were not necessarily expecting or that they had seen before. The Bengals and the Bills played half of a quarter of football. We don't know if their game plan will adjust, but you said it. The Bills put a lot of bad tape on film today, and special teams, on offense especially. So going into this game, you're right. Maybe they go in with some false bravado or false confidence, and it's going to be up to the Bills, though, to show that they can clean that up and make plays when it matters most. But I still think from a talent perspective, the Bills can go toe-to-toe with anyone, including the Bengals, including the Chiefs, and including whoever represents the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Thank you so much. Oh, we got a last minute super chat here. Hey, Bengals win ugly on the way to Super Bowl. Also, coaching almost cost this team today. Very disappointing with that aspect. We talked about that a little bit more earlier in the show. So rewind the show. You can get our thoughts on that. But I have to agree, and I think Sean McDermott took accountability for that piece of this game today. He mentioned that Ken Dorsey probably wanted some of those calls back. It's not all going to be perfect. And to your point, I think part of what's baked in for Josh and the players about like getting things that they maybe weren't expecting was, if they hit a couple of those deep shots, we're probably having a much different conversation about Ken Dorsey in this game, much like we did last year. It was so up and down with Brian Daboll. That's one thing that I think fans also forget a little bit about, is like the explosive nature of the relationship with Daboll before he left. Like, we fielded, how many shows did we get where hashtag fire Daboll was trending on Twitter? And that was an actual thing. And I just think no matter who the play caller is, it's never 100% perfect unless it's Andy Reid and there's that built-in long-term level of trust and, consistent success, which Ken Dorsey doesn't have the opportunity to have that yet. It's his first season as a play caller.
Yeah, and he's going to grow as he continues to perform in that role. And even Sean McDermott, there were some timeout usage issues that you wrote about that he would like to probably have back. And to his credit, he said there were some things he didn't like that he saw in terms of how they were matching up. And as a head coach, that's something you have to do at the end of the day. But even a guy like McDermott, who's been coaching for many, many years, but as head coach of the Bills since 2017, he's even still learning on the job here year by year. So it's something that you expect no matter who the coach is, no matter the position, no matter the experience.
And I think in the end, I do agree with him in hindsight that if you don't like the look and you have one of their speedy guys burning down the field and who beat Trey White on that play, and he didn't like something pre-snap, and you have timeouts in that spot with a game hanging in the balance, I don't have as big of an issue in hindsight. I think the immediate reaction to it was more of an uproar because they didn't get it. But you also have to take into account what could have happened, and you don't have the benefit of seeing into a crystal ball to make that call. So I didn't have as much problem with the first timeout. The other timeout, maybe he didn't like something that he saw, and I understand that. But I don't know. It's easy to play, Monday morning quarterback and second guess everything. Sometimes in those situations, you want to make sure you're set and you're best situated to defend.
Yeah, and the first one came on a Tremaine Edmonds tackle where he went across the field to make a play. The second came on a 4th and 1 where it looked like they stood up Jeff Wilson or Ahmed, whichever one had the ball. But you said it. It's all about the way you line up. The only issue I would have had with either timeout is the fact that this was a one-score game, a very close game, and timeouts ultimately proved to be important late because the Dolphins went through their third timeout, I want to say with about 7 minutes left in the game. And when it really mattered, they could not burn any time off, or they couldn't stop the clock, I should say. And the Bills were able to wind it down to 0 after that Singletary run.
We hope you wind this episode all the way back to 0 and watch anything that you missed. We covered everything in this game. We're going to cover so much more as we move into next week. For Ryan Talbot, I'm Matt Parrino from Highmark Stadium, signing off. The Bills 34-31 winners in a nail biter over the Dolphins. We'll see you next week. Tune in then. Take care, everybody.